condamnation. Elle doit se flageller!
La comète est le signe que le Seigneur nous protège.
Excellence?
Oui.
The movie begins with a mother and daughter traveling to a shrine as part of the girl's journey to be married off. At the shrine, the young girl steps aside to pray to the Virgin Mary while she sings. A group of bandits arrives and questions what they are doing there. The mother explains that her daughter is preparing to receive her veil, and the bandits decide to rob them, taking a valuable necklace from the mother. The girl warns them that the Virgin will punish them. Just as she speaks, a bird flies by, and one of the bandits gets bird droppings in his eye. Amused but unsettled, the bandits return the necklace and allow them to continue on their way. Upon reaching the city, the mother and daughter navigate through the bustling market to reach the church where they are expected. The young woman, named Benedetta Carlini, meets with Sister Felicita to discuss the dowry and finalize her entry into the convent. Felicita expresses gratitude for another bride of Christ, but reminds them of the challenging times and the high demand for limited spots. After some negotiation, an agreement is reached, though Felicita makes it clear that this isn't a simple business transaction. With the deal settled, Benedetta is taken to change into her new attire. While doing so, she notices a small statue of the Virgin Mary and inquires about it. A nun explains that the convent has its own statue and advises Benedetta to pray only to it. The nun then warns Benedetta that her sharp mind might lead to trouble. Benedetta is then shown to her sleeping quarters, and the nun leaves her to settle in. That night, unable to sleep, Benedetta wanders through the convent and ends up in front of the Blessed Virgin statue. Feeling lonely and doubtful, she prays, wondering if Mary can hear her. In a sudden and strange moment, the statue topples onto her, causing her to fall. When the other sisters come to help, they marvel that she wasn't harmed, calling it a miracle, though Felicita downplays it, remarking that miracles often bring more problems than they solve. Years later, a play depicting the life of Mary is performed, and Benedetta plays the role of the Virgin. During the performance, Benedetta experiences a vision of Jesus appearing to her in a field, telling her that she is his chosen one. As the vision unfolds, a rope on stage lifts Benedetta's body, symbolizing her ascent. After the play, the community gathers for a celebratory feast. Benedetta's mother, noticing her movements during the performance when she was supposed to be still, questions her. Benedetta explains she had a vision of Jesus, but her mother dismisses it as part of the act. As the family is preparing to leave, a commotion is heard at the convent gates. A young woman named Bartolomeo barges in, begging for refuge from her abusive father. Shortly after, her father arrives, chasing after her. Benedetta's father intervenes, and Benedetta pleads for Bartolomeo to be allowed to stay. Carlini agrees to cover the dowry, and Bartolomeo's father also demands money, which he is given. Later that night, Benedetta assists Bartolomeo with a bath and offers her fresh clothes. When Bartolomeo lifts her dress to use the toilet, Benedetta notices bruises on her thighs. Concerned, she asks Bartolomeo who hurt her. Bartolomeo explains that after her mother died from the plague, her father forced her into a twisted relationship, treating her as his wife. She also reveals that her brothers abused her in a similar way. In an attempt to comfort her, Benedetta compliments Bartolomeo's beauty. This leads to an intimate moment where Bartolomeo leans in to kiss her. Before things escalate further, another nun, Christina, arrives unexpectedly, interrupting them. The two women quickly separate and head back to their rooms. However, just before parting ways, Bartolomeo impulsively kisses Benedetta, leaving her confused and shaken. Benedetta returns to her room and prays for clarity. The following day, as the nuns sing during their prayers, Bartolomeo stays unnervingly close to Benedetta and begins to touch her. Benedetta becomes overwhelmed and experiences a vision of being attacked by snakes. She cries out for Jesus, who appears in the vision and strikes down the serpents with a sword. When Benedetta asks why the snakes are there, Jesus explains that they want to come between her and what is sacred. As the vision intensifies, Jesus approaches her and kisses her. When Benedetta comes back to reality, she finds herself speaking the words of her vision out loud in front of the entire convent.
Je resterai avec toi.
Benedetta seeks out a priest to talk about her recent vision. When the priest asks her what she felt during the experience, she admits she was afraid. The priest reassures her, explaining that the path to seeing Jesus often comes through suffering. Later, while working, Bartolomeo accidentally bumps into another nun, causing bobbins to fall into a pot of boiling water. Instead of taking responsibility for her mistake, Bartolomeo tries to avoid blame. Benedetta, however, insists that Bartolomeo retrieve the bobbins from the hot water herself. Sister Felicita, noticing the tension, summons Benedetta and questions whether Bartolomeo has done anything to upset her. Through their conversation, Felicita begins to suspect Benedetta's growing affection for Bartolomeo. As a mild punishment, she assigns Benedetta to fasting and additional prayers. Later, Benedetta sees Bartolomeo being treated in the infirmary. The nun, Jacopa, in an odd display, shows Benedetta a parasite growing on her chest, referring to it as her lover. One night, Benedetta is found writhing in pain in her bed. Alarmed, the nuns rush to her side, but she continues to convulse. Felicita orders a doctor to be called. The doctor arrives, and after examining Benedetta, finds black bile in her urine. She claims this is not unusual and gives Benedetta medicine to help her rest. While Benedetta remains tied to her bed due to her condition, Bartolomeo visits her. She shows Benedetta her hands and asks why she had treated her so cruelly. Leaning in close, Bartolomeo expresses her desire for Benedetta and kisses her. That night, Benedetta dreams of being chased by bandits and getting shot in the hand. As the attackers close in, Jesus appears and kills them all, saving her. He then approaches Benedetta, calling her his bride. However, Benedetta accuses him of lying and pushes him away. In response, Jesus strikes her and slashes her chest, causing her to wake up screaming. The nuns rush to give her more medicine to calm her down. The next morning, Felicita places Bartolomeo in Benedetta's room to care for her as her new roommate. Over time, Benedetta becomes more comfortable with Bartolomeo's presence. Bartolomeo finds the dress Benedetta wore when she first arrived at the convent, and also uncovers the small statue of the Virgin Mary that Benedetta had kept hidden. Benedetta confesses that she had been misled by the devil when she hurt Bartolomeo. Later, Bartolomeo observes Benedetta working on financial calculations for the convent, but struggles to understand what she's doing. Benedetta offers to teach her, but Bartolomeo declines, saying she has no desire to learn. That night, Benedetta experiences another vision, this time of Jesus on the cross. The next morning, she is discovered with wounds on her hands and feet, resembling stigmata. The nuns, awestruck, kneel before her, believing it to be a sign of divine favor. Sister Felicita, however, remains unconvinced and questions what really happened. After hearing Benedetta's explanation, Felicita brings her to her chambers for further investigation. Despite the doctor's efforts, Benedetta's wounds continue to bleed, prompting a closer examination. Felicita notes that while Jesus bled from his forehead after being crowned with thorns, Benedetta shows no such wound on her own head. As Felicita and Benedetta leave, the provost asks Felicita why she's so doubtful. Felicita simply states that no true miracle has ever happened while someone was lying in bed. Later, Benedetta begins speaking in a demonic voice, with blood pouring from her forehead, claiming that Jesus is speaking through her. The provost is convinced that this is a genuine miracle, but Felicita remains deeply skeptical.
Péché a été épargné par la seule grâce!
This angers the provost, who accuses Felicita of bringing God's wrath upon them by doubting Benedetta's divine experiences. Christina told Felicita that Benedetta was lying, but Felicita defended her. When Christina asked why she was defending her, Felicita said that perhaps God had sent her. At the next gathering, the provost announced that Benedetta would become the new abbess, saying Jesus had chosen her. As prayers began, Christina objected. She said they should choose a new abbess. The provost told her God had made the choice, but Christina continued to resist. Felicita ordered her to sit down, and despite Christina's objections, the transition happened. Benedetta moved into her new room with Bartolomeo. As Bartolomeo approached Benedetta, they were interrupted by a medical emergency. Sister 𝐂𝐡𝐞𝐫 was severely ill and might not survive the day. Christina and Felicita stayed with 𝐂𝐴𝐞𝐵. As they sat, Christina asked why Felicita was allowing all of this and confessed that Benedetta's stigmata was a lie. Felicita warned her not to speak this out loud. Felicita then left, and 𝐂𝐴𝐞𝐵 died shortly after. Christina went to confess, saying Benedetta was lying and had used glass to make the stigmata on her forehead. When the priest asked if she had seen this, she said yes. In their room, Benedetta was teaching Bartolomeo numbers. Bartolomeo kissed her, and Benedetta responded. Bartolomeo locked the door, and they became intimate. The next day, the nuns gathered for a sermon. The priest invited Christina to speak. Things escalated when Christina accused Benedetta of being a false prophet and mentioned that she had cut herself with glass. She said she told Felicita, and Felicita was called to speak. When asked if Christina had witnessed the act, Felicita said she had not. Benedetta spoke in her male voice again, ordering Christina to be punished. The priest gave her a whip to strike herself, and she continued until she was bruised. Benedetta and Bartolomeo continued their intimate relationship. As they were doing so, someone watched them through a hole in the wall. Christina climbed onto the roof, crying. Felicita ran to save her, but Christina jumped before she could reach her. Felicita cried, witnessing her death. Benedetta came to caress her, but Felicita accused Benedetta of lying and said she was going to report her to higher authorities in Florence. Benedetta told Bartolomeo that Felicita had gone to report her. Bartolomeo began feeling uneasy about Benedetta. Felicita reached Florence and reported everything. She requested a local papal nuncio to come and see for himself. At the convent, the nuns prepared for a funeral under Benedetta's command. The provost told everyone to pray because the plague was coming. Benedetta reassured them that Jesus had promised the plague wouldn't reach them. As they were walking, Benedetta suddenly collapsed. Soon after Felicita returns to the abbey with the nuncio, they learn that Benedetta has died. However, she suddenly revives, claiming she had been in heaven and knows the fates of everyone present. The nuncio, unimpressed, informs her that a trial will be held against her. Felicita is called to testify, revealing Benedetta's relationship with Bartolomea. When Bartolomea is questioned, she initially denies any sexual involvement with Benedetta. Under torture by the nuncio's men, she ultimately confesses the truth. Later, Benedetta washes the nuncio's feet, and he confronts her again about her actions. At that moment, Bartolomea enters and reveals the tool they had used in their intimate acts. Benedetta, speaking in a male voice, lashes out at her persecutors, predicting that the nuncio will soon fall ill. The nuncio discovers Felicita has the plague and orders her condition to be kept secret. Bartolomea, meanwhile, is expelled from the abbey. The nuncio signs the order for Benedetta to be burned at the stake. Before her execution, Benedetta asks to pray for Felicita and goes to her. In the town square, just before the execution, Benedetta reveals new stigmata and, in a male voice, declares, "The angel of death is near." Felicita, showing her sickness, accuses the nuncio of bringing the plague to Pescia. Chaos erupts as the townspeople stop the nuncio's men from burning Benedetta. Bartolomea unties her and finds a bloody shard near her feet. An enraged mob kills the nuncio, while Benedetta and Bartolomea flee, and Felicita sets herself on fire in the flames intended for Benedetta. In an abandoned stable outside town, after spending the night with Bartolomea, Benedetta insists on returning to the convent. Bartolomea begs her to stay and admits she faked her stigmata, but Benedetta denies it and returns to Pescia. Benedetta lived in the abbey until she died at age 70, and the plague never reached Pescia. Did this story spook you out? Let us know in the comments below. For more horror movie recaps, subscribe to our channel and we will see you in the next one. Fear awaits you.